This interview was carried out as part of my video, The Indie Dev Cheat Code, about the double threat approach of being an indie developer and a content creator together. If you find this video interesting, be sure to check out the main video and the other interviews. And of course, show the devs some love. They earned it. Right, so first question about content creation stuff. Do you make a point of carving out time to make content specifically? Or do you just kind of see what comes up and then, make the best of it?
I try to do a bit of both if I can. So if I see a good moment, then I'll try and save it for later. But it doesn't happen too often. Generally, I try to carve out time for it as much as I can. I try to spend, of the 4 weeks in a month that I've got, I usually spend about a week working on marketing stuff. And that includes everything from short form to making a YouTube devlog to any of the Patreon stuff. I consider that marketing, I guess. So it's just a matter of trying to find the right moments. But I mean, most of it is probably pre-planned, I would say.
Right. Do you put any thought into like a brand when you do your content? Do you feel like this is my brand, I need to stay on brand, or is it just what happens?
It's difficult because I think in the modern era, in the age of TikTok and things like that, there's this sort of need for authenticity almost, and if you're a bit too corporate about it, then it actually is a negative thing to people on places like TikTok. So you need to almost be a little bit vulnerable in a weird way and sort of show this sort of true side to everything. So the more janky it is almost, the better it is for things like short form. But I do have like an overall brand which I try to keep to, and that comes through in like the avatars which I use. Like the current project which I'm on, I usually have branding colors for that, and that usually like perpetuates out throughout everything that I sort of try to do as much as I can. So right now on Long Gone, everything is this sort of yellowy green and this blue, which I've got for my overall brand color. And I try to have those colors anywhere that I can. But when it comes to things like TikTok, it's very different because it's just, you've got to be quick and almost dirty with it. Like it's just like I film a lot of stuff just on my phone when it comes to TikTok stuff, and sort of showing it. Like I even film my monitor sometimes just to show what I'm working on. Like it's really janky at times, but that sort of connects with more people than the polished sort of YouTube style video. But it's very different between different platforms. But I do try to keep some semblance of a brand. So if it is in a different setting other than TikTok, then people sort of have the color awareness at least on the branding side, that they can sort of remember that, hey, it's that dude that makes X game, and then I can sort of hopefully keep those people in my orbit a little bit.
So when you think of brand, then you're thinking specifically things like color schemes and logos and things like that. Because I spoke to a few people, and they would count, like what you said about the jankiness and the authenticity, they would count that as part of their brand. You see that as separate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because I'm more of from a visual background, I guess. So everything that I see is a visual based thing. But I could totally see like people's brand as in how they act on camera and the things that they say. They'll have certain catchphrases that they need to repeat over and over again because that's the thing that people sort of latch onto. I don't really have any of that really. It's mostly like a color thing for me, but I think everyone's got a different sort of understanding what they think their brand is, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's just sort of keeping away from that too corporate feel, because at the end of the day, I'm an indie dev. Like I shouldn't try and act like a AAA person because I'm not anymore. Pretty much, like it's this weird sort of juxtaposition I have to constantly fight with. Because I used to work at Helix at Ubisoft, which is the sort of branding, marketing, advertising department within Ubisoft. Like I worked for those guys for like a year and a half and worked on key art. So I'm painfully aware of what goes into branding, but at the same time, like I know people are trying to get away from that. So it's sort of like I'm trying to unlearn a lot of things which I've learned in the past at the same time in a weird way, and it seems to be working so far. But yeah, it's very hit and miss between the different platforms.
Right. So some YouTubers, or I guess TikTokers, Instagrammers, whatever you want to call it, just people who make videos, not streams. They go through like a full script writing process. I know there is content creators like, I don't know if you know Polymars, but basically he starts a stream, knows that in his stream he's going to do a particular thing, and then he sends that stream off to an editor, and then the editor creates a video, and that's how he does his content. Do you have like a script writing process, or do you just kind of see what happened in the stream and then turn that into content?
For short form, it's very on the whim. Like you're just like you either you've had a moment which you really liked, or you remember something that you said. And I think there's a lot of like tools that we've got. So on Stream Deck, I've got something that I can just hit a marker and then go back and look at the footage later and pull that out. And sort of the faster it is, the better for that. But when it comes to the YouTube videos, it's a very, very different process. So when I'm making a devlog or something, then it's a lot more. I try to structure it in blocks more than anything. So in my videos, I've got chapters. So like chapter one, chapter two, chapter three, and I try and tell some form of a story, because I think ultimately like people aren't there just to get fast pieces of content for YouTube. They're there for an overarching sort of theme as much as they can. Albeit like sometimes my videos can run a bit long. I think it's something that I'm trying to handle at the moment and trying to get a little bit better at. But I do try to have some form of structure to that a little bit. But I don't sit down and write an entire script or anything. I don't know what I'm going to say or anything like that. I more let the content which is currently making the game. I let whatever I was working on the game sort of dictate. So I normally cut all my footage together and sort of put that in my chapters with what the things that I want to show, because people are probably a little bit more visual when it comes to something that I'm making. So people are more interested in what they're looking at, and then I'll do the voiceover on top of it and sort of cut it down as much as I can from that. So working from a script doesn't really work for me personally, but I can totally see why other people might benefit from that, and it might be a faster process to actually be able to knock these things out a little bit more consistently and a little bit more coherently. But I think for me, I try to let the visuals of the project sort of lead where the video is going as much as I can, and then just let the sort of vibe go with it, and then I start layering on music on the top of that, and just letting it go automatically without me really thinking about it too much. Because at the end of the day, I'm a viewer, and I try to take a step back from my own work as much as I can and watch it and be like, okay, how would a new viewer watch this versus me being really strict when it comes to a script or anything like that. Because something that I learned a long time ago was if you write something down, you automatically immortalize it, and it becomes gospel in a weird way, and it doesn't really leave you any room to shift or get out of that. And you sort of think, okay, it's written down, therefore it has to be made like this now, and it's quite a dangerous thing. So I try not to write stuff down as much as I can. At the very least, I will write bullet points to my chapters of the sort of things which I want to sort of cover. But writing out a whole script, I think that's kind of dangerous, because it sort of stops you from going with the flow of whatever you're trying to make, especially when it comes to the long form. But when it comes to the short form stuff, the less you think about, the better. Almost, like it's more about like the weird catchphrases or like the interest, because when it comes to short form, everything is about that first 2 seconds. If you can't grab someone's attention by something visually within that first 2 seconds, then it's all out of the window. So there's no planning for that. It's just you see something that you're working on. If you think it looks interesting, then it's probably going to make a good short form video. And then you can grab it and just be like, all right, I'm going to use that. And then the rest of the video is sort of irrelevant. It's just that first 2 seconds. Because once they're past that, then it's just the views start rolling in, basically. And that's the best way to sort of tackle those things, and just let it be free and loose as much as you possibly can. Because again, if people ever detect anything corporate about it, they automatically are just like, yeah, no, go away, I don't care. That's why I think we've seen a lot of brands, like if you go and look at the TikTok page for Bose, like the audio company for Bose,
Yeah.
really fascinating stuff, because they've hired like Gen Z people to work on that, and they don't do like these corporate cuts from the adverts or commercials or whatever. Like it's Gen Z kids making Gen Z content, and you can tell. And they're just like, it's all like the text over the top of it, like really janky, crappy cuts and stuff. And it's really intelligent stuff, because it's like, yeah, they're feeding to the market, and they've just got a bunch of followers now because it worked. It's just a matter of like knowing who your audience is when it comes to these different things.
Kind of ironic that you said that short form content, it's better to just not think about it.
Yeah,
like ironic
it
in a
is
lot of
ironic.
ways.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
on that note, actually, how distinct do you see the different platforms? Like, when do you get into a completely different mindset for making, for example, a YouTube short versus a TikTok versus an Instagram reel kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a very different process, because I think when people click on a YouTube video, they are there for a very different purpose to what the short form is. Because if you click on a YouTube video, it's normally because you've been attracted by the thumbnail, you already follow the person because you subscribe to them, or they're making content very similar to what you're already interested in. So all of these things sort of play to your advantage. So you can start a YouTube video very differently, and the vibe and the tempo and the pace, everything is very, very different because of just that fact alone. Whereas short form is the complete opposite. Whereas 9 times out of 10, you're catching people that have no idea who you are. They've got no interest in what you're doing, but you're trying to catch their attention. And the best way I sort of describe it is that short form is like polystyrene. It's just like throwaway content. It's not like high art or like entertainment or anything like that. It's just pure like dopamine hits of just swipe, 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 swipe. And if you can catch someone while they're in that sort of off guard moment, that's what it's all about. So you've really got to attack it in a different way. It's not like YouTube whatsoever. It's just a very, very different beast, and it's all about grabbing attention and keeping attention for the first 2 or 3 seconds. And then once you're past that, then you can really get into the weeds of what you're trying to show people. But even then, it's sort of, you're on a time limit because people are very impatient when it comes to short form. So you've got to look at these things in a different manner because they're very, very different audiences. And the way I always look at it is, if you look at all sort of video content, like the high mark of cinema is, like movies, like blockbuster movies, and it goes all the way down the line to, documentaries, TV series, all that sort of stuff. And then it gets to YouTube. And then at the very bottom is short form almost. And you've got to treat it as such. And you would think that with that bar of quality, it would be, the majority of people are watching high quality stuff, but it's actually flipped, you know, like more people watch short form content than any of the content, and then YouTube is second, and then movies are third, and then it just goes down and down and down. Like, so the worse the quality is, the more people watch it in a weird way. So you can't overthink it because if you start overthinking it, then you start adding quality in a weird way. And it reminds me, like, it's just this weird sort of juxtaposition we have to constantly deal with. And it reminds me a lot of when I was working on South Park in a weird way. And I got kicked back some artwork that said, "Oh, this looks too good. Make it look crappy." It's kind of like that's kind of what you have to do with short form in a weird way, And it's a really strange thing that people are still trying to get their heads around. And I think that's why a lot of corporations are really struggling with things like TikTok. I think that's why a lot of politicians don't get it. I think that's because the Gen Z kids, they're just, they're after quick, snappy, short content that they can keep scrolling through. And if they like it, they'll like it. If they don't, they don't. And then they just move on. So you've got to look at them differently.
Fair enough. I feel like you might have implicitly answered this question already, but do you try and take advantage of trends and stuff when you do content?
Not too much, if I'm honest. Like there's things on short form. So if you're on TikTok or something, there is like trending music that you can use. There's people doing certain styles of videos over a couple of weeks. There's certain things that people do, but I don't think it really matters when it comes to making content for video games in particular, because it's all about the game itself rather, like, so all you can really do in short form is just try and grab their attention in the first couple of seconds, unless you're saying something really interesting, then it's a little bit different. It's not about the game anymore, it's about the content creator. And when the content creator is saying something very specific, then you can follow trends like that. So I think Pirate Software is a great example, like the fact that he's got such a unique style now that he's sort of solidified in his brand almost. Like we automatically know when it's a Pirate Software video because it's always that split screen. It's always, it's always him in Microsoft Paint. Like we know what's coming, sort of thing, in a good way, because you know what to expect. But for everyone else, like trying to do that, it almost comes off like we're trying to copy the guy or something. So it's hard to even try and tackle this as a content creator when you're just talking about the games industry in general.
Just as a side note, I know a lot of people who used Microsoft Paint on stream who were a bit annoyed because they all get accused of copying him, even though they were already doing it.
Oh, dude, I can't even imagine that. That's brutal. Yeah, it sucks. But yeah, I mean, it's a part and parcel of the internet. Like you get popular at doing something, and then that's it. Like it sort of becomes yours in a weird way, even if it wasn't yours to begin with.
So anyone who's been on YouTube knows it's not, well, the internet in general, to be honest, but YouTube specifically, the comments are not always the friendliest place to be. Do you have like any specific way of dealing with negativity on your platforms?
I mean, I'm probably a bad example of this, but whenever I get negative comments on YouTube, it's less of an issue for me because like the comments on YouTube are very tame compared to what they are on TikTok for the most part. Like if you ever go on TikTok, it's rife with people just speaking their mind. and they will say whatever they want, however they want, and they're kids, and they like a lot of them are kids. Sorry, like I'm not like implying that every single person on TikTok is a kid, but a big audience of them are younger people. So yeah, they haven't quite gotten used to the whole feeling bad when they say negative things to people yet, and so like they're just trying stuff out constantly, and yeah, it's a lot worse over there. So when I see something negative on YouTube, it's usually a lot less. It's not as bad. So I'm not too bothered by them. But all you really can do when it comes to negative comments is try and take what they're trying to say, like in a constructive way, as much as you possibly can. That's not always easy. Obviously, every single person gets, everyone has feelings. Everyone understands. Like this isn't, it's you can't live inside of a glass case. Like this. That's not how these things go. But all you really can do is try and take the constructive feedback through whatever they're trying to say, and say, hey, like at one point on my game, I kept getting comments from people saying, hey, all we've ever seen is this front yard. It's getting really boring and stuff like this. And they would say all these negative things about the front yard, like, oh my God, is this all you've worked on? Blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, okay, like they're being mean and stuff, but I can take that from the fact that, I've shown too many mechanics in this area of this game. So I either need to stop showing this area or I need to stop showing the game for a while so they can miss it a little bit. So you can take the feedback through like the filter of whatever they're trying to say. But if people are just being mean, then they're just being mean. You just move on. But the best way I sort of deal with it overall is that I just try to visualize who these people are for the most part. Like it's not like this sophisticated reviewer that's being like, oh yes, I'm going to leave you a negative comment, sir. Like it's never that. It's always some random kid that is just frustrated because they haven't seen enough, or like you're not creating the content that you want them to make, and it's usually that. So if I visualize that and it's just some random kid like trying to like express themselves, then I can deal with it. I can compartmentalize it a lot easier in my head. But when it's like if it is just some dude in a coffee shop on his laptop, like I'm going to leave this man a bad review, then that's fine, but to each their own. But that's the best way I deal with it, is just sort of visualize who these people actually are and then compartmentalize it in the best way that I can.
I like that whole comment about TikTok and everything. It sounded a bit like a long, elaborate way of saying "toughen up, buttercup."
Yeah, pretty much.
Get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like when it comes to the TikTok stuff, like whenever I got negative comments, I was like, people probably shouldn't do this, but I got pretty sassy with people. I just started being sarcastic back.
No.
Yeah, I was really good at it. Yeah, I know, right? It just, but I mean, bring out that British charm, and just start giving it back to them, and then when they start getting ratioed, as it were, and they your reply starts getting more likes than the meaningful comment, then you automatically dispel it. So that, I'm not saying everyone should do that or try that, because you can probably get in trouble. Yeah. But I mean, that was a good way of me handling stuff on that platform specifically, because it was just a bunch of kids that were just trying to call me a lazy dev or whatever, and it's like, all right, cool, but I can dish it out 10 times better than you because I've been doing this a lot longer, dude. So like that was the only time that it really worked, but I would never probably try that on YouTube. I wouldn't try that on a place like Instagram. It would be a very different audience. It's just a very different feeling. But on TikTok specifically, yeah, it's usually millennials and Gen Z, and then on Instagram, it's more millennials than Gen Z. So it's a very, very different feel and mood.
So on that note, what would you say the hardest part about being a content creator is?
The hardest part about it's just getting traction most of the time, I think. It really depends on what it is you're trying to sell and what you're trying to do, because it's constantly the unknown, I think, is what I struggle with the most. It's not really about getting the attention or anything like that. It's more about, I'm making a video and I have no idea how it's going to do. I don't know who is going to connect with it. I don't even know if everyone that is subscribed to me is even going to see it, because the algorithm might not, pick it up and actually do something with it. Because I started seeing that on things like TikTok and stuff. You get 50,000 followers like I have, and nobody, like half of the videos don't even get 50,000 views. And it makes you wonder, like, okay, how is the algorithm even working anymore? Like, I don't actually understand those sorts of systems. So like the constant frustration with not understanding the back end of these systems. And I think the absolute lack of transparency when it comes to the platform holders like don't provide us with this information to sort of understand how this even works. Is I think just that frustration is probably the hardest thing, which I deal with more than anything, and not really understanding like, okay, what is the best time of day to actually publish these things? What is, you know, how do I reach the best audience? Like, all like, what is the best country I should like actually show all this stuff off to? And there's all these weird questions which they could probably provide answers to, but they just, they haven't really done that. And I understand why they don't, because everyone would do it and then it would get flooded and then we'd be straight back to this baseline where we are right now.
Yeah.
But it's the constant like unknowns around the algorithm, and if you are posting at the right time, if you're posting the right thing, all of this sort of stuff like that, that unknown is the biggest thing. I mean, I've never really struggled with the ego side of it, because I'm not in it to be a content creator, I guess. Like, it's mostly around the things that I make. So I'm not too concerned about, getting sponsorships or anything like that. That was never my intent. So I don't have to deal with like the normal sort of content creator stuff, which is, oh, I didn't get enough views this month, or my subscribers aren't growing as much and stuff like that. I generally try to keep that out of the back of my mind as much as I can. I don't really think about it too much. Like, if I'm growing, great. As long as I'm not shrinking, sort of thing. Like, that's my sort of mentality behind it. But the unknowns around like the algorithm and stuff is always like the most difficult, and sort of seeing like how that works and how it doesn't work sometimes it can be really confusing and very, very frustrating.
Yeah, everybody's in that boat.
Yeah, I think so.
If you could only improve one thing about your content creation side, if it was like quality of video, consistency of release, frequency of release, anything like that, you can't just say, "I wish there were more views." But like, if you could only,
of course,
if you could only improve one thing, what would you improve?
I'd improve it. Well, it's just twofold. So I'd improve my consistency. Astronomically. I know, like, right now I'm starting to think about like, okay, on Saturdays I think I'm just going to sit down and hunt for short form videos. I think that's something that I've been thinking about for a lot, and I just need to sit down and do that and be consistent about it. So then throughout the week I can sort of post things that I've discovered, quote unquote, or created and made all those videos over the weekend, and then I can sort of spread those out throughout the week. I've been thinking about that a lot. So the consistency is the big one. But for the YouTube video stuff, it's mostly speed. That's the main thing, which I want to try and improve as much as possible, because I'm still in the early stages of it. So I do this thing where I post a video and then I have to rewatch the whole thing every like half an hour or something. I'm still in that weird phase. And you just add in hours and hours and hours, and like, oh my God, I'm getting so sick of looking at this. So if I can speed up, that'd be awesome, because I can make videos. It takes so long for me to do it though. It's just like I just feel like I'm going crazy after a while. So those are the two things: consistency, getting videos out, and just the length of the time that it takes me to make these things.
Okay. Right, on to indie dev questions then. So this is specifically just about the indie dev side of things. Okay. How important would you say technical ability is for an aspiring game developer?
Technical ability, 0, if I'm honest. I think anyone, the thing that I always say to people, and I've said this a million times, making games is one of the easiest things in the world. Anyone can do it. It's just finishing them, which is almost impossible, So, and the starting, actually getting involved and getting your foot in the door is not actually that difficult. Like, there's so many YouTube videos out there. There's tutorials, there's blog posts, there's books, there's courses. Like, they make Mario games for making video games. That's how easy it's become these days. Like you can play Roblox and figure something out in there, play Minecraft, and start building stuff out. Just get the feel for it. And then from there, like, everything else the rest is history. Same thing for programming. Like, everyone thinks that you need to be this crazy math genius, but you don't. Like, you can pick this stuff up pretty quick. It's just like any language, really. So it's just a matter of you putting some time into it and, not being too afraid of it. And I don't think anyone really needs any crazy technical ability. You will pick it up as time goes.
So there's plenty of fairy tale stories like Five Nights at Freddy's, Among Us, Balatro. They're the only ones I've written down, and I can't think of any more off the top of my head. Do you think games like this create unrealistic expectations that indie devs should shy away from, or should they be aspirational, or anything in between?
I think it's something in between, right? It has to be something in between, because you do need those points of inspiration. You need those points of like, okay, this is like the upper echelon. This is but at the same time, there's the things at the bottom that we need to take into consideration as well. It's not about ignoring the things at the top. It's just about taking into consideration the things that are at the bottom as well. So it's about figuring out the average of what most people actually go through, and it's somewhere in the middle. Like most people aren't going to make a Balatro, and most people aren't going to make the worst game in human history. They're going to land somewhere in the middle, and it's just about having that, sort of realistic expectation when you first enter the space. But I do get frustrated sometimes by people using the things like Stardew Valley as examples for, well, if I work on a game for 5 years, then my game's going to be awesome as well. And that's not always the case, because there's tens of thousands of games in the path of those games which all failed. So we can use them as examples, but they are, they're exceptions, not the rule. As long as we keep that in mind, then I think it's okay to be inspired by them. Just don't follow them like they're the average.
Yeah. This is kind of similar to the first question, actually. Do you think having a completely unique, never been done before idea is important, even possible at this point?
I don't think it's important at all now, because I think a lot of gamers out there are just hungry to play a game that they like in their genre, right? So if they like a Metroidvania, if I make another Metroidvania and it's like, oh, you unlock the double jump, we've never seen that before, it can still be a fun game, So I don't necessarily think that every game has to be unique, though it does certainly help when it comes to marketing. That's the only thing that I would sort of put the caveat on. If you've got a Metroidvania that does something slightly different, and you're able to show that effectively and communicate it visually, I think that is a huge benefit. But I don't think it's the end all be all now, because we see plenty of games that do well that are just in the same sort of cookie cutter, and they do well. Like I'm absolutely absolutely a part of that problem, I guess, with some of the games that I've made in the past, and I'm absolutely okay with that, because people have enjoyed them, and that's all that really matters. As long as people are enjoying the games, they don't have to be unique, they don't have to be flashy. They can just be something that people are expecting sometimes. Sometimes that's a marketing benefit more than anything. That's why we see. Sorry, go ahead.
So, would you call 10 Bells one of those, like, following up? Because, like, I know it wasn't the first Anomaly game. Like, this whole subgenre came out of nowhere for me. I didn't really know of it until 10 Bells, basically. But then, as soon as I became aware of 10 Bells, suddenly there's like 8 other games that were already there that I didn't know about. So, like, would you consider 10 Bells to be like at the front of that wave, or is this a thing that's been around for a while?
No, I mean, the Ex-AAA sort of started the Anomaly Hunt game, I guess, and that was in what was it, November 23. So we knew that we were going to be a part of the first initial wave, and if that wave will continue, we have no idea. But I guess to sort of point to that, though, it's like, yeah, we do things that are very, very similar to every other Anomaly game, but we just try to add little things as much as we can to just try and push it forward. And we're not messing with the base formula or anything. We just did things like add a story and change the cultural context. So it was set in England instead of another Japanese train station. And it's these sorts of things which, those are like the incremental things that sort of push genres along, because then the next person that's making one of these things might be like, you know what, I'm from X country and we've got this cultural thing. It'll be really cool if I did an Anomaly game in this. And then, so we're sort of helping push that wave forward, I guess. I'm not saying we're like at the beginning or at the end or the middle of it. It's just we're a part, like a small piece of the puzzle, I would say. But yeah, I think it absolutely helps.
So if money stopped being a concern, like if you didn't have to worry about paying the bills, paying any of the money concerns, what would your development process look like? Like, would there even be a development process? Would it be a case of, oh, well, I don't need to do this anymore, or would you carry on doing this but hire people? Would you carry on the same way as you are but just less stress?
I guess the dream which I've got, and this is regardless of money in any sense, so it sort of answers that question a bit, which is, I'm of the mindset which I'm not like chasing like having like a huge team. I don't want to make a AAA game, and if money wasn't an option, right, like I could do that, and that's all good and well. But I really like being in the pits of a game as much as I can and working on as much as I can. So the dream for me is just to have like 3 people maximum that are all sort of multi-talented solo devs all working together on one team that are all paid well and just working on small scoped games that people really, really enjoy. And that's the ultimate for me. That's where I want to get to. And regardless of money, that would still be the goal. Like if money wasn't an option, that wouldn't change, because I've done the AAA thing. I've worked in AAA studios, and it's awesome to be a part of that machine of pushing the boulder up the hill with everyone else. But as an indie dev, it's a very different experience, and I can't see myself working on anything big as an indie dev. I'd much prefer to just work on small stuff and still have that intimate sort of, connection between different devs and sort of figuring stuff out together in the pit. Like, I don't think that would ever change regardless of how much money I had.
Fair enough. Do you find it difficult to balance the creative and technical aspects of game development? Like, I know you're probably heavily on the creative side more than the technical side, but like when you have to switch between the two, do you find it an issue, or is it just natural?
Yeah, it can be an issue, and this is where like the weird expressions I always have to constantly come up for myself to remind myself, like the whole "it has to work before it looks pretty" statement, which I have to remind myself of that. It's not that I'm just constantly saying that to other people. I came up with that statement for me because I would often get lost in the creative side of it, and just if I could sit there and draw something all day, then I would just like 5 days would go by and I haven't made anything. It's like, oh crap, like okay, it has to work before it looks pretty. And me jumping between those two things as a solo dev is incredibly difficult because when I'm working on artwork, I have to sort of stop all the technical side and I have to compartmentalize them in my mind almost, and it makes it a lot easier for me. But there's other people that sort of jump between them on a daily basis, and they're absolutely fine with that. But it is something that I struggle with, and I don't think there's anyone out there that doesn't struggle with the jump between those two things sometimes.
Yeah, it's a mental gear shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the hardest part about being an indie game developer? Both sections end with this question.
Yeah. I mean, the hardest thing for me is like the constant panic and worry about the financial side of it. Like, it's something that we don't talk about enough on the dev side. And when we're like sort of making content for other people or they're checking out like what we're working on, we don't discuss it enough. But it is like the hardest part about it. Like, I'm constantly worrying about like, okay, where's the next paycheck coming from? Like, how am I going to fund this thing? Do I have to go through a publisher? How am I going to do a Kickstarter? Like, do I need to become an influencer at some level so I can like actually start to get, some, funding from this in various different ways? Like, it's a constant sort of anxiety that you have to deal with. And it's a part and parcel of the industry. And it's something that I will always probably struggle with. So definitely that.
I mean, that's what this video is about, is like looking into the viability of using content creator as a way to fund being an indie dev. So we're on to the combo question. Sorry, it's taking longer than I thought it would.
No, I've got all the time in the world, mate.
Okay, good. As long as I'm not holding you back, I'm okay with it.
No.
So was the decision to be a content creator and indie dev together like a conscious one, or was it like you were an indie dev and then you thought, oh, I may as well make videos, or I may as well stream? Or did you decide like at some point to do both?
It was more of a realization because after we released 10 Bells, we had our game played by a lot of influencers, and that's what we were sort of aiming for. And before we released, we were talking to a lot of influencers, and they were like, "Yeah, it's going to cost you 40 grand for me to play the game for an hour and stuff like that." I won't name which influencer that was, but there was a lot of those conversations, and me and the co-dev that was working on 10 Bells, we realized very quickly, like, oh, like we don't have this money, so like the only way that we can really do any of this is market it ourselves. And that really came to fruition when the game came out. And all of these influencers that we were in touch with eventually started playing the game anyway. And the one in question that, charged us 40 grand or whatever, we didn't pay him or anything, but he played the game anyway. And we noticed that the streamers weren't converting to sales whatsoever. They were converting to wish lists, but they weren't really converting to sales. And we noticed that all the people that were sort of, themselves influencers in a weird way, they were selling stuff. So there's this realization, combined with all the TikTok stuff of, like people like the authentic sort of side of developers now, that all sort of led me to the conclusion, like, I just need to get my face in front of a camera at some point and just start to, get people to look at what I'm working on through not personality or anything like that, but just showing my authenticity of it and how excited I am about the project. So that was the catalyst for all of it, and sort of made me realize, like, okay, like I need to start doing this. And that's ultimately what pushed it more than anything. But at this point, I was also like pushing stuff on TikTok as well. And like those things were kicking off, but that was more about just the game itself. But now I'm sort of transitioning to it being a little bit like more of myself involved, and not just the game content itself.
So I mean, obviously, one of the points of this, I mean, the point of this video is talking about
Mm.
it as a way of marketing and funding a game development thing. This isn't a question. I'm going a bit off piece here.
Yeah,
So you obviously see it as a very viable marketing model or marketing tool, but not so
absolutely.
much as a funding tool. Am I understanding that right?
I think both of those things are one and the same for the
I just
most
meant for
part.
you personally, you're not looking at content creation as much as a funding model as you are as a marketing model.
Correct. Yeah, I would say the game is trying to sell the game itself. So I'd get funding through the game and how the game looks, and that has to stand by itself for me personally. And like me, like sort of showing off the game is the marketing side of people getting interested in what I'm working on, because like they come into the streams to check out the game, but they end up staying for me, and then they become a strong part of the community. And I think that's like huge. I think that's a really big part of it.
Right. So I think we might have just answered this question. Do you see one as a means to the other? But yeah, you just answered that question. Scrap that one.
No worries.
So how much, if at all, do you find content creation and game development create a kind of feedback loop? So like you get people coming in because they're interested in the game, and then they become part of your community, and then on the other side you get people who see the game and then come in, check out a stream. And wait a minute, that's the same way around, isn't it? And vice versa.
Yeah, yeah.
I just worded the same thing two different ways, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think most people come in, like they see the game, they come into the streams, and they want to talk a little bit about the game. They ask a couple of questions, and then they end up staying because like they've gotten used to the community side of thing. And then you get the opposite as well. Like there's people that wander in that are just watching the stream, and then they sort of like they get interested in the game, even though they're not interested in pixel art, or they're not interested in anything to do with Unity or anything like this. They don't even care about games development sometimes, which is awesome. Like it's just it ultimately what you want to do is sort of bring everyone into the middle anyway. That's sort of what we're all trying to achieve, right? Like
Yeah,
I
we
don't
get
want
them
everyone,
normies.
yeah, normie. Yeah, I want everyone to be a normie, I guess. Like I don't want everyone to be there for me, and I don't want everyone to be there for the game. Like you want it to be somewhere in the middle. So I think that's generally where people end up anyway. So I'm pretty happy with that outcome either way, because it was never my intent to be a streamer anyway. It's just a means of like being able to do what I'm doing. So it's good that people do meet in the middle, so I don't get too egotistical about it or anything like that. I don't want to get weird, you know.
Don't want to get weird. Okay.
Well,
Um,
well,
so, what would you say the biggest challenge is in using content creation as a model for whatever you're using it for? In your case, it's more marketing, but if it was marketing or funding, whatever it is, what would you say the biggest challenge is in using it for that?
can you rephrase the question? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Sorry, the biggest challenges you come across in using content creation as a tool for your indie development endeavors.
Oh, okay.
So in your case, you're thinking of it more of a marketing tool than a funding tool, although
Yeah.
you understand it can be both. But like, what would you see as the biggest challenge in using it that way?
Yeah, I guess it's the like trying to bridge the gap between the consumer and the people that are actually going to be funding the project, because they're almost very different things. Almost like you're trying to sort of appeal to a wider audience, but that wider audience also needs to include the company that might potentially give you money one day. So you've still got to have like this professional persona almost, while trying to be authentic and vulnerable and being like this like normal person that you so you sort of have to pretend that you don't really know what you're doing, but you also have to pretend that you do know what you're doing, and trying to balance that between those two things is really really difficult sometimes, because you want to come across like you know what you're doing, but also you don't want to look like a complete idiot. So it's yeah, I think I struggle with that the most. I think that's the hardest part.
So if you had to start from scratch, and
Mm.
you could only choose one of the potential methods that we've kind of covered, so you got like things like content creation, finding a publisher, crowdfunding like Kickstarter, something like that, all the
Mm.
potential ways you could fund an indie game. But that method would definitely fund your game. So you're starting from scratch, and you could click your fingers, and whichever method you chose would definitely fund your game. So it's basically the game's going to get made and funded. You basically just get to pick your favorite method of funding a game. Which
Yeah.
one would you go for? Lottery winning, not counting.
Well, I'd like to win the lottery, but no. So there's it depending on which country you're in. They have funds for people that have. It's basically companies that have got astronomical amount of money, and they are just trying to like get rid of money out of, like from tax breaks and stuff,
Right.
and they do tax write offs and stuff. So they actually like you can apply to these funds, and there's a few of them out there. So I think Inner Sloth does one with the folks that do Among Us. Like there's a couple of others out there. So that's always the best one, because they are literally, here's the cash, good luck, and they just wander off into the sunset, and that'll sort of leave you making the decisions without taking a cut. Like, but the flip side of that is sort of I wouldn't want to go with a publisher straight away, because like the opposite is true in that there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of hooks, there's a lot of, you know, like they want a certain percentage of the game, they might want to change the game in a certain way, they might be like, well, this game type is trending now, so we actually want to twist your game into becoming this. Like there's a lot of weirdness around that. So it's more, for me, like whichever has got the most sort of creative freedom is the most important thing for me.
Okay. So this one's a bit open-ended. You can apply whatever caveats you want. Should someone become an indie developer? Assuming they genuinely want to, and it's not like they just want money, so they pick this great career path. But like whatever caveats you want to apply to it, should a person, any given person, become a game developer?
Games developer or indie developer?
Indie developer. This is all about indie development specifically.
Yeah, I guess I'd say yes, it's worth it. With obviously a lot of caveats. So it really depends on like where your situation is, who you are and stuff. But it's the thing that I always tell people is try it out as a hobby first. I wouldn't like dive in with 2 feet sort of thing. That would be the main caveat, which is try it out as a side hobby. And if you really start to fall in love with it, it can become the most amazing gig in the world. It's like, I can't imagine doing anything different. So I'm very biased for me to tell people like, hey, yeah, it's obviously the greatest gig in the world. You should absolutely do it. But there are caveats. There's a lot of stress to do with it. Like the mental side of it is, you know, there's a lot of stress and pressure that's put upon you from family members and things like that. If you haven't got an income yet, there's you know, the actual struggles of trying to figure out how to make a game. And the more experience you got, the better it is, the easier it is. So caveats aside, though, I do think it's worth it. I do think it's worth people trying out. And it's just a matter of transitioning into it properly, sort of thing. I wouldn't ever, you know, convince people to jump in with 2 feet without even a second thought of notice or anything. I would tell them like, hey, slowly transition into this. And if you start getting to the point where you're running home from your day job to work on video games, that's when you know you're ready. That's when you know you probably need to start thinking about this on a long term. Otherwise, it's going to drive you insane, because it did for me. So yeah,
fair enough. We go to the last question. So this one is short by design. This is like specifically, I'm only looking for a 1-sentence answer. If you could give only one short piece of advice to an aspiring game developer who wants to go down specifically the indie dev and content creator path, like the combo double threat, what would that advice be?
The advice would be keep your first game as small as possible. Like that's the thing that people fall into the most. So scope is the thing that hurts most new indie devs. So I would say scope your game down as much as humanly possible. And if you do that, you'll get into the habit of finishing games, and you'll get addicted to finishing them, and that's where it really, really starts to take off.
Finishing games. I'm just going to write that one down. Right. That's the whole lot. That's
where I've been messing up.
The video game industry is currently the most lucrative entertainment market, and it's not even close. The independent video game industry alone is worth around $5 billion, and is expected to double over the next 5 years.
There's just like all this insane shit over the last like 5-6 years. I don't know, dude. My life's completely different now. It's a completely different time.
And I was always interested in games. I just never really thought that I could do it. I didn't think I was smart enough. I thought it would be too competitive for me to get into.
There was a lot of those conversations, and me and the co-dev that was working on 10 Bells, we realized very quickly, like, oh, like we don't have this money. So
I used to kind of like try and troll them back, kind of, or you know, just give them just bad information and try and play with them a little bit. But I found that is actually detrimental.
Instantly, like I think the first day I streamed game development, 2 people came into my chat and they were like, "Shut the hell up, you stupid B word. You're not a real coder. Go make me a sandwich." And I was like, bruh.
It's possible that it's a possibility that it exists, and there is a chance, but it's like winning the lottery when we talk about those kind of games.
it does take a toll a little bit on your ego when you have to hear that over and over again. Like,
You're probably just using the whole I make games for me thing as an excuse to avoid having to face the prospect of failing. So maybe you should stop fannying about and get on with it, Beaks.